Here it is. I was born about 80 years ago in a little bitty town in North Louisiana. We went from there, and I was raised and went to school in a little town named Alla, Louisiana. I lived there until I left home, and even somewhat after that. I quite possibly had the greatest mom and daddy that ever was. I had an absolute great childhood. I had great experiences as a child. I had no massive problems. I sometimes think that I don't have a very exciting story to tell, but maybe it is to somebody. It was okay to me. I started school in that little town named Alla, and I finished high school in a school named LaSalle High in Alla, Louisiana. I had an awful lot of different experiences. The little town probably had 2,000 people or less. I didn't have any large dramatic type happenings in my life, but they were exciting times to me. I began my experiences in church in the First Baptist Church, Alla, Louisiana. I've not been a part of any other movement other than a Baptist movement. My mom and daddy, both or one, carried me to that place. I don't remember just which. And then they come and was part of it with me. My mother more than my dad. My dad worked a lot, but he was a member of that church and supported that church. I would get told here and there I needed to get saved. I wasn't sure what I needed to get saved from, and I was a long time in my life trying to understand that getting saved, but not until I was grown. I got saved as a young boy, and the person that probably the most responsible for that happening in my life was a boy named Sammy David. He was about a year and a half or something older than me, but he and I were good. We were good friends. We were good pals. But Sammy David would tell me that I needed to accept Christ, and I would agree with him, but I wouldn't do it. And there was another lady in town, and she was old as my mother, or maybe a little older. Miss Sunshine would tell me, read John 3:16. It got to, my brother's name was John. My brother would say something. He was kind of a witty boy, and he would say something like, read me 3:16. I didn't pay much attention to that, but I think about that an awful lot. And Sammy David kept after me, I thought, but I didn't mind him being after me because he was my friend. And it's probably because of Sammy David, as I think back, is probably the influence that caused me to accept Christ during a revival that was preached by Brother Sailhammer that made a trip there once, and a lot of people got saved under his preaching. To show you the influence of the First Baptist Church in that little town was pretty great, to the point that in about 3 more years that Dr. Sailhammer came back to that town for a revival. If you would go to that 10 o'clock preaching, that was a legitimate excuse for missing school. So you can see that probably the revival was pretty popular. And we went there, and this preacher would do, I'll never forget, one of his sermons, and he said, back in those days, that's in the 50s, early 50s what I'm talking about, and flying saucers were big deals. UFOs now, but then we called them flying saucers. And They would be seen all around. I never did know what they were, but he come there and said, at the end of the revival, I'll tell you, I know what flying saucers are. I know why we can't catch them. Well, we got interested in that for a sermon. And later on, he did tell us what flying saucers are. You ask me sometimes, I'll tell you what they were, but not now. I went from that little place, I got married, me and Wyatt got married as kids, which, by the way, at this time has been getting close to 63 years. I worked on drilling rigs. I worked derricks on drilling rigs on land. I worked on those things out in the Gulf of Mexico until I got a job here in Orange, and we come to Orange to stay to this time. And it's been a real nice life. When I come here, I was probably about 24 years old in Orange. I think it was 1960. Back when I got saved, I was told I needed to get saved from my sins. I didn't have a lot of that, I didn't think. But I finally discovered that you don't just get saved from things, you get saved to something. And then when I was about 24 or 25, that began to make sense to me in this church, McDonald Memorial Baptist Church, under Brother Jimmy Burks. I began to get involved in things because I could not, I would say no, but no one would take the no. But I couldn't do this stuff in front of people. And that made me extremely nervous. And I had a pretty personal talk with God about that. And it was, God, if this is the kind of stuff you want me to do, then you're gonna have to do something here, because I can't do this. And then I began slowly to get to the point where I could do that with young people. Young people would make me nervous. Now they just try my patience. But I began to do that, and it began to work okay. And then things began to happen, and then I began to do more. I did RA work here with those boys for 15 years in a row. Serving God has become a big deal in my life. Sometimes I do it right, but a lot of times I do it wrong. But I always want to do it right. That's actually about the story that I have, kind of in a nutshell. I'm Wickie, and I'm His.